Hey everyone, I wanted to come back on here and talk about what's going on. It's such an intense period in the world, so much to talk about with the lunar eclipse that is today, the upcoming solar eclipse that is December 14th, as well as the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction on the winter solstice. The winter solstice I'm going to get to a little bit later at a future update, because there's so much to talk about now. So don't forget, we're also working with the Uranian system of astrology, which is one of harmonics and frequency. And we are working with the Aries or world axis, which represents the hive, all goings on this planet. You know, it's as individual as it is collective, because it's energy we all experience and share. So it's a really good thing to consult, especially right now. It not only tells us about the state at any given moment of the hive, but it tells us about the information or messages for humanity that the universe is communicating and we are experiencing. And right now, that is disclosure and metamorphosis. And so with Pluto Zeus here on the world axis at this moment, we have the initiation of deep changes and development in the world. Pluto Zeus is a very initiatory energy. And with the Kronos Volcanis on the side here, we have the beginning of influential changes and development in the form of government powers, powers of state, and these can be both nefarious or benevolent. And this is going to be very important because it's also right there on the world axis, December 21st, which is the beginning of the solar cycle again, and it gives us an overview of the coming year, December 2020 to December 2021. And because the Kronos Volcanis at that time is right at the winter solstice, is right there along with Mars, Zeus, Pluto, it can be indicating possible military planning or strategy or operations, perhaps to deal with these ideological conflicts. But with the Venus, there can be peacekeeping movements as well, keeping the people safe, as this truth is revealed, and perhaps this can even be a combination of the military being mobilized for vaccine distribution, so for humanitarian purposes. Although the vaccine is a whole other can of worms, and I need to do another video on that, that we're going to be up against. And I don't believe it's going to work out long term for many reasons. And I've said this before, and I'll probably do another video on it. But the main reason is that because the Kung Flu and the Vax are of nefarious alignment, they are not truly aligned with service to humanity. They are more disguised as such, and this energy is not supported in the new frequency. So anything of this old matrix that lacks integrity will not survive, be it a person, a government, a virus, these lockdown mandates, it's all going to eventually fall apart. The node Hades and the Hades Kronos Neptune on the world axis, which are both front and center now, and also part of the winter solstice. So the effects of these structures are going to last all year. Hades Kronos Neptune with the Aries point, this is the combination for flat out fraud. Hades Kronos are things high up, can deal with, government or crimes or criminals on a big scale, or at a high level or government level. So it's also telling us about government deceit, great uncertainty and instability, obsolete governments and obsolete government ideals, deceit about the past. The Hades Kronos Neptune can also be, on the flip side, leaders who are humanitarian, whose work is obscured, it's not apparent, or they're operating behind the scenes, and that would be a Trump or your Sidney Powells or your Lynn Wood, General Flynn, all these people in the fight. So it's telling us about fraud and corruption everywhere. And this structure, along with the node Hades structure, is telling us about the criminal connections and that there are widespread worries and concerns, a lot of deprivation and fear in the world, and unpleasant things as the shadow government and the media, big tech, continues to pelt the collective with the old fear narrative. The node Hades also tells us about the care and concern for the common man and having to deal with all of these base and nefarious things. But let's look a bit further at this node Hades axis. If we go to the nodal axis, we find Uranus, Vulcanus, and Apollon somewhat there. So there are major tensions around personal freedom. This is a very strong-willed combination, and with the Apollon, it is widespread. So many people are waiting for conditions to change. There's a revolution here that is happening in relation to others, and with the Jupiter Poseidon, there is truth and clarity, insight and justice that's coming in. It's also telling us that we are connected with disruptive energies. If we go to the Hades, we find the Neptune, Vulcanus, Apollon around this structure, saying the deception is as great as it is widespread. But it can also be telling us about humanitarian or beneficial energies that are perhaps unseen or operating behind the scenes. And so moving to the Saturn at Mitos, we're at this real bottleneck of energies right now. There are forces pushing forward toward the truth and the new frontier, and there are forces trying to keep the old corrupt matrix intact. So the Saturn in Mitos can mean tremendous restrictions and obstacles, overwhelming conditions in the world as the shadow government tries to hang on to the narrative. So that's why you're seeing this Kung Flu psyops is in turbo gear. The lockdowns are getting completely wacky. The censoring's unlike anyone has ever seen. And this structure is hanging around. It's really exact right now, and it's hanging around for a few more weeks, and it's there at the winter solstice, but frankly, it's not going to be as strong as it is now. I think we're all really feeling the suppression right now. The Saturn Mitos is also telling us about persistence, perseverance in dealing with the obstacles and overwhelming conditions. It's telling us about the special operations that are going on behind the scenes, both nefarious and benevolent. There's a lot of war strategy, both sides. But from the light, there's this push to out the shadow government, the media, and all that is corrupt, because with the Plutonian energy, we must be shown the truth, and people have to experience and witness it for themselves. So we're really reaching a point where you can't unsee what has been and is going on. Even if one is not consciously acknowledging it, it settles in the unconscious. And with these two eclipses, the one today, November 30th, which is a lunar eclipse, and the solar eclipse on December 14th, the universe is presenting us with energies that are really going to help collapse the old and begin construction of the new. And so eclipses are incredibly important. To know and understand an eclipse is to know and understand the overriding theme that you'll be working with in the months ahead. Eclipses are energetic downloads that provide information for our evolutionary paths. So they create events on and around the eclipse date, but we individually and collectively will be working with these themes for the next 3 to 6 months. Individually, really only if the eclipse falls on a very personal point or structure, but they do absolutely on collective levels have strong impacts. On its own, the lunar eclipse at 8 Gemini 38, which was November 30th, the mercurial inner mode of this eclipse is telling us about changeable emotions and instincts, and they are going to influence the expansive qualities of the Sagittarius solar eclipse on the 14th, and you'll see what I mean. A lot of transformation here, a lot of inner transformation. A lot of people are seeing individually what's going on. They're being shown. They're going to be getting into a lot of critical thinking. So with this lunar eclipse, the first thing we find is Pluto on the main axis, which is telling us about deep changes in our relationships and our associations that are caused by changing insights and attitudes. And this is much, much bigger than it sounds, because as the truth continues to cascade out from here on out, there will be a need for integration between what we are feeling and our conscious, objective selves. Pluto here represents the conflict flowing between our conscious and our unconscious, and there are very strong feelings that are starting to be had as people start to realize just how deep this chasm is between the truth as the election fraud rolls out and so many other things, and the incredible evasion and denial of it by the media, by the politicians, by big tech, as they simultaneously are playing pretend Biden presidency and blowing up this Kung Flu situation to catastrophic proportions. You just cannot unsee that. We get strong feelings about it. And with the Pluto, we can't ignore these feelings. They need to be integrated. And this is what leads to these deep changes. As changed attitudes force us to move away from certain associations, relationships, partnerships that aren't rooted in integrity and truth, and toward others that are rooted in integrity and truth, with like minds and shared ideals. And with the Capito Poseidon, and I'm going to return to this structure in a moment, but just briefly, this structure with the Pluto here is going to be a lot about these breakout connections, partnerships, groups, communities, businesses, that are forming that are a part of this new Earth of truth and integrity. And with that Mercury-Neptune node, all of our perceptions and intuitions are heightening. We're starting to see through the fog and into the subtle correlations between things. And we need to start seeing through our false expectations and perceptions of what we're reading, watching, hearing, and what we're intuitively feeling and thinking about it. Because with all of this censoring, the contorting, the twisting, the blatant lies, people are going to be forced to rely on the power of their own intuition. Because Uranus-Hades here can present upsetting and disruptive things. A lot of anxiety, fear, anger as these truths come out, and the election is just the tip of the iceberg. The Uranus-Hades also rules digestion and digestive problems, so you can see how there can be some need of having to digest what's going on, and that is a process that takes a while. Still, Uranus-Hades can also be used creatively in terms of helping others, in terms of serving others at need at this time. So it can be very visionary in terms of that, new ways of helping each other, getting each other informed, bringing them into the new frontier, and this positive manifestation really speaks to and goes back to the Capito Poseidon, which is very exact on this Pluto. Because as the media falls, and frankly any other system or structure that's been nefariously aligned, new structures, new breakout groups, businesses, organizations that are aligned with truth and integrity and shared ideals will emerge. And, because of this massive deception, there's going to be trauma in the collective from those who are still unaware or just awakening. And for a time, while the Kung Flu hoax is still alive, even if the courts strike down lockdown and mask mandates and the truth begins to emerge about the virus, you're still going to have a lot of people wearing masks that are anxious and fearful, and that still creates a lot of conflict in the populace. So, when what needs to happen is a deprogramming of sorts and the need to slowly digest, take in, and process what is actually truth. And I think this is what the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction speaks to as well, as we're moving toward expansion, but it's a controlled expansion. And every single person needs to proceed carefully and come to the conclusions for themselves of what is truth and what is not. And this is the Plutonian integration that will be happening between our emotions and our objective selves. So in terms of these breakout groups, you're beginning to see them everywhere. There are now excellent sources percolating out there, giving truthful information and broadcasting from YouTube and other platforms. You just may need to ask around a bit, but people are very aware now of where to go for information. And if people request it, I'll put some sources out there as well. Another good example I can think of regarding the ideological conflicts and the new groups forming is Ticketmaster, who is mandating their own policies around the virus and the need for vaccination proof in order to go to their events. And I think this is a good example of what is going to go down. You know, how you're going to see this shift away from the old matrix, the false reality. So there's going to be some people who are going to be pleased with this policy, but there will be many who will just stop patronizing Ticketmaster completely, you know, who wouldn't get the vaccine no matter who was performing. So you'll have these competing businesses that are forming that are aligned with truth and New Earth, you know, which people and performers will patronize, which puts more pressure on a company like Ticketmaster to transition into the light or die. You know, that's the situation now, evolve or die, and even in businesses. And with the Kronos Apollon Vulcanus, this is a major expansion and change for people and for nations. We're gaining important knowledge and understanding here. There's an expansion and strengthening of government power and leadership, which will also be aligned with the Capito Poseidon and the whole intellectual, spiritual development that's happening. So the Jupiter Zeus here and with the Pluto as well are beginnings of positive growth and development, but these are also aspects of ignition or fire, or the beginning of legal proceedings. You know, and you can see this ideological conflict getting more passionate and fiery as the truth comes out, you know, and as we move closer to the winter solstice, the configurations, particularly with the Mars, Zeus, Pluto, and the Venus at the winter solstice, can indicate military strategy or planning, you know, but with the Venus they're you know, these could be more like peacekeeping deployments. And still yet, this configuration can represent, and with the Mercury Poseidon as well, a strong, passionate, ideological enthusiasm, strong mental leadership, ideological conflict. So with the solar eclipse on December 14th at 2308 Sag, and this is also when the Electoral College meets, so this will be really interesting. It's also an important eclipse both for Biden and Trump, but I'd say even stronger for Trump, since you can see it almost to the second opposes his sun and his node, and also conjuncts his moon. So these events are going to be incredibly impactful. And with that opposition to the sun, these are big turning points that offer new directions. In Biden's chart, the eclipse squares his natal meridian. It's about a little over 3 degrees off, and that can make advancement more challenging, and it can also affect the domestic area as well. But I tell you, like I mentioned a few months ago, and you had these very clear-cut endings in his chart, and if his birth time is accurate, you know, because you could see here this directed Pluto right on his meridian ascendant midpoint structure and the natal admetos and directed meridian ascendant midpoint structure. And there are a few other configurations, that are repeating the same theme of these deep, irrevocable changes in the career area. But let's get back to the solar eclipse. So we've got Uranus here, about a degree off, but in alignment. Now, the Uranus is a planet of independence, personal freedom. Uranus does what it wants, how it wants, when it wants, doesn't want to be told what to do. It's very individualistic, very resourceful. So there's a strong inner need to be able to live freely and follow one's own path with this configuration. And one could even say a lot of rebellion and revolution for freedom. And with the Vulcanus Poseidon there's an awakening and a realization of the truth. This is a strong ethical stance combination, strong ethical stance of a nation. And because Poseidon seeks truth and clarity, and it's being powered like a volcano by the Vulcanus. So this is the truth will prevail combination, and it's also one of major ideological clashes as the truth continues to be revealed, between we the people and the shadow government, the media, politicians, big tech. And so if we go a little bit deeper into this structure, we'll find that the conjunction of Jupiter-Saturn also plays a role. So here we have Jupiter-Apollon with the Poseidon, and also Saturn-Apollon with the Poseidon. There's a lot of steady, widespread expansion of the truth. We're gaining a lot of knowledge here relating to the problems. And with the Chronos and Mitos, we have a situation where we may be faced with sudden change circumstances. This could be an unexpected or sudden change in government, or it could be, what is likely coming, which is a revolt against government restrictions or authorities. It can be either way or both. It can be that we, the people, are fighting back against restrictions, and it can also be obstacles coming from the deep state and shadow government, more tactics trying to be played. But I also see this as stability in the government that's rising, because we can't discount that powerful Vulcanus Poseidon. We're not moving backwards here. We're headed toward the light, and that powerful Vulcanus Poseidon, and it is somewhat with the Aries point, the world axis, and a 3-point picture here. People are really awakening to a renewed sense of national pride and honor. All right, so moving right along to this incredibly important alignment of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in the first degree of Aquarius, which is exact on the winter solstice. The Jupiter-Saturn conjunction tells us of important social and historical changes in government, action, and laws. Jupiter is the planet of expansion, vision, higher truths, and Saturn is very earthy, pragmatic, disciplined, conservative. It's very concerned with stability. So with Jupiter-Saturn, there is controlled expansion. Now, this is important. What do I mean by controlled expansion? What the Jupiter-Saturn changes will really involve is the collective learning and seeing and experiencing, digesting the many difficult truths about the controlled matrix in which we've lived. The needing to digest what we're seeing and then carefully beginning to engage in change and the movement forward. And I think the Jupiter-Saturn, along with the Zeus-Poseidon on the world's axis, is just the beginning of this steady cascade of truths that'll continue for years to come. The voter fraud is just the kickoff. And this Uranus-Pluto midpoint is exactly in alignment with the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction as well, which makes the situation even more extreme. There are intense desires for freedom and change, for revolution. People are seeing the truth, and there are going to be very strong feelings around what people are seeing and processing, around what's ethical and moral, which is what puts us at the edge of this ideological war. So with Jupiter-Saturn, patience and perseverance are the keys, because Jupiter-Saturn is one of those combinations that can sway between optimism and pessimism, which is why controlled expansion is so important. And so there you have it, a bit of the road ahead, and I'll probably be updating in the next few weeks as we have an entire new year and solar cycle to take the deep dive into with the Lunar Eclipse. So I hope everyone can take a few moments every day to savor these amazing biblical times that we're in. Blessings, everyone.